Also, we have a very special dedication this morning. Today's daf is dedicated by Shoshana Lerner and family in honor of the birthday of their beloved husband and father, Rabbi Ari Lerner, Ameh V'Esem Shana, and I was asked to read a special message. We're still friends, right? I was asked to do it. Here we go.
Don't shoot the messenger.
I'm just doing my job. Mazel tov and happy birthday to my best friend and eternal partner, Ari. This is not me talking. I just want to be clear. I'm just reading the message. May Hashem continue for 120 years to guide you and protect you and grant you brios, simcha, brachas, parnasa tova, and may Hashem always answer all of your tfilos l'tova. May today's Talmud Torah be specifically added to all of your beautiful zechuyos as an eternal gift from me to you in an expression of my love for you and the hakaras hatov I have for you and your learning Torah every day. You give me and our beautiful family so much Yiddish and nachas. Thank you and happy birthday. Love, Shoshana. Mazel tov. Ameh V'Esem Shanim Tovos. Shkoyach.
That's from all of us.
That was your brother-in-law. Does anyone else have something you want to share about Ari? Before we start? I'm sorry? I'm not going to. This is Ari. It's beautiful. Zachisa. It's beautiful.
Tell us your secret,
All right, Devoseh. The daf seems so ordinary after that. It's all right. Devoseh, so today's daf is Nun Hey Amud Aleph. Nun Hey Amud Aleph. We are picking up from Nun Dalud Amud Beis, the last line. Amrli Rav Ashi Ravina. So what Rav Ashi said to Ravina, remember again, the Gemara, we're actually picking up on a little bit of a side point, although the primary topic we were dealing with was the topic of Chomesh. Specifically, again, under what circumstances, when you redeem something that is Kodesh, under what circumstances do you have the ability to go ahead and add, or do you have an obligation to add on an additional fifth? So if you remember, again, the Gemara spoke about the concept of a behemoth tmeya, that if one is makdish a behemoth tmeya, then one goes ahead and redeems that. That again, the Gemara seemed to indicate, or the pasuk seemed to indicate, that under certain circumstances, one would have to be mosif chomesh. So the Gemara said, "Amli Rav Ashi Ravina." So Rav Ashi said to Ravina, "Behemoth tmeya, a non-kosher animal, betchilas hekdish isa, be'emtza on top of non hamad aleph, be'emtza hekdish lesa." So also remember again, just to go ahead and define our terms a little bit. So what we call tchilas hekdish, we'll call it primary hekdish, but for our purposes, what that means is you go over to an animal and you're makdish the animal. I hereby consecrate the animal. So that's called tchilas hekdish. So Rav Ashi said to Ravina, that's what? That a behemoth tmeya, a non-kosher animal, you have the ability to consecrate it in a primary fashion, but emtza hekdish lesson. Now what's emtza hekdish? What's middle hekdish? So look at Rashi, first Rashi and Nun Hamad Aleph. Says Rashi, be'emtza hekdish lesa, nehid de besof hekdish lo mishkachas lo. So we'll say, so first of all, what Rashi is also cluing us into is, there are essentially three different stages of Hekdish, or three different parts of the Hekdish framework. There's Tchilas Hekdish, the beginning of Hekdish, Emtza Hekdish, the middle of Hekdish, and Sof Hekdish, the end of Hekdish. So Rashi jumps for just a moment to Sof Hekdish. Look at the top Rashi again. Be'emtza Hekdish lesa, nehit b'sof Hekdish lo mishkachasa. So both sides, there is no question that a behemoth tmeya has no shaychus, has no connection to what we call end stage Hekdish. Why? Because what's end stage Hekdish? Mishum de official, thank you, it's very sweet. Mishum delav lemizbeach chazio for the shaka bebinyan. So we'll say end stage Hekdish manifests itself in one of two ways. Either you're offered up on the mizbeach, or B, you actually become part of Bedek HaBayis, right? You become part of the structure of the Beis HaMikdash. Obviously, again, a behemoth tmeya is not shaykh to either of these. A behemoth tmeya cannot be offered up as a korban, nor is a behemoth tmeya usable for Bedek HaBayis. Therefore, says Rashi, it goes without saying that a behemoth tmeya has no shaykhas, has no connection to what we call sof hekdish. However, mihu behekdish, I'm finishing Rashi, mihu behekdish sheni mishkachasa, but a secondary hekdish. What secondary hekdish? Shematfisa tachas acher. So both say, so here's what we know. We know, for example, you could be makdish a behemoth tmeya. Now what the Gemara is suggesting is what we call be'emtza hekdish. Emtza hekdish means, let's say you take a consecrated item and you want to transfer that sanctity of the item onto a behemoth tmeya. that would be secondary hekdesh, Rabbosai. So meaning, again, it's not the primary item that's been hukdash, but the sanctity of something else has been transferred onto this animal. So the Gemara just suggests over here, I should say, Rav Ashi Stravina, that a behema tameya, you're able to go ahead and consecrate it, what we call b'tchilas hekdesh, but it does, but be'emtze hekdesh lessa. Amarlei, lefi she'ena b'sof hekdesh. And why is that? Because, again, since a behema tameya can't come to what we call end stage hekdesh, as we just said before, because it can't be offered up as a carbon, nor could it be used for beda kabayis. Therefore, the Gemara is suggesting over here that because it can't get to sof hekdesh, therefore what? It's not shaykh to emtze hekdesh either. Amrali Ravacha midifti Ravina. So Ravacha of Difti said to Ravina, but 1 second, be'emtze hekdesh mia isa. I don't understand why you say that. Why can't you say that a behema tameya is subject to what we call emtze hekdesh? So both again, remember, just to define our terms, tchilas hekdesh means you actually are makdish the item. Emtza hekdesh means you transfer the sanctity of something else onto this item, and sof hekdesh means use on the mizbeach or in beda kabayis. So Rav Achav Difti says to Ravina, so let's go back. So Rav Ashi says to Ravina, it would appear to me that a behema tameya is not shaykh to emtze hekdesh. It's not shaykh to middle hekdesh. Why? Because the only time you can be shaykh to middle hekdesh is if you're shaykh to sof hekdesh. And because for what? Therefore, lemaisa, you cannot go ahead and use it for emtze hekdesh either. Comes along Rav Achav Difti and says to Ravina, but 1 second, be'emtze hekdesh mia isa. I don't understand why you say that. Even if we all agree that a behema tameya can't get to the stage of sof hekdesh, which Rabbi say everybody agrees with, but why would that preclude it from getting to the status of emtze hekdesh velosif nami chomesh? And therefore, because it should be shaykh to emtze hekdesh, if you redeem it from that middle state of hekdesh, what should be the halacha? Rabbi say the halacha should be that you should have to add on a chomesh, a fifth. Amralei, Rabbi say again, because remember, going back to yesterday's daf, what we've seen already through the last couple of dapim, that chomesh is an extra surcharge on any time that you redeem hekdesh. So then, Amralei harihu kisof hekdesh. No, because in reality it should be treated like sof hekdesh. How so? Mas sof hekdesh ain't no mosiv chomesh. Because we'll say if you redeem something in end stage hekdesh, you don't have to go ahead and add on a chomesh. Av emtze hekdesh ain't no mosiv chomesh. So it's Rabbi say in the middle stage of hekdesh, one should not have to add on a chomesh as well. Amrali Rav Zutra Breid Rav Mari Ravina. My chozis de medamis leila sof hekdesh nidmiye litchilas hekdesh. So says Gemara Rabbi says something very interesting. So now at least according to this opinion, that a behema tameya could come to middle stage hekdesh, emtze hekdesh, which means what Rabbi say, that you could transfer the sanctity of an already sanctified item, let's say, onto a behema tameya. So now let's take for a moment that right now the position that we are quoting agrees to this fact. Now the shaila is, what do you compare emtze hekdesh to? Do you compare emtze hekdesh to tchilas hekdesh, to the first stage hekdesh, or you compare emtze hekdesh to what? To sof hekdesh, to the end stage hekdesh. What's the nafkamina? Oh, the nafkamina is like this. Good. The nafkamina is, do you have to pay an extra chomesh when you redeem it? If you compare it to tchilas hekdesh, you have to pay an extra chomesh. If you compare it ultimately to sof hekdesh, you don't have to pay an extra chomesh. So the Gemara is suggesting over here that you should compare emtze hekdesh to sof hekdesh, just like sof hekdesh doesn't have a chomesh, so to emtze hekdesh doesn't have a chomesh. But ask the Gemara, or ask Rav Zutra, Breid Rav Mari to Ravina, why? Why do you assume that you're comparing emtze hekdesh to sof hekdesh and therefore no chomesh? Nidmi letchilas hekdesh. Compare it to first stage hekdesh and what? Pay a chomesh. He says, no, it appears to me clear that you should compare emtze hekdesh to sof hekdesh. Why? Shekein nitvas mi nitvas. Because I will say it makes sense to go ahead. It makes sense to go ahead and compare something. Nitvas, I will say, means nitvas literally in this context means permanent. But what it means over here is it makes sense to compare something that has an inherent kedusha with something that has an inherent kedusha. What do I mean by inherent kedusha? As opposed to a transferred kedusha. So because hekdesh rishon, or I should say, what's the lashon? Tchilas hekdesh and sof hekdesh both have a primary sense of kedusha, as opposed to emtze hekdesh, which is a transferred form of kedusha. Therefore, it makes sense to compare it to tchilas hekdesh. Ki nitfas mi nitfas. Adrabah, says the Gemara, letchilas hekdesh havle ledemuye shekein davar sheyesh lo achar of kedusha mi davar sheyesh lo achar of kedusha. The Gemara says, no, you know what? You should compare emtze hekdesh to tchilas hekdesh, right? Because remember, when you get to sof hekdesh, there is no stage of hekdesh after that. But you should compare, remember, emtze hekdesh does have another stage of hekdesh after it. Rishon, or I should say, tchilas hekdesh, also has another stage of hektish after it. Therefore, it makes more sense to compare emtza hektish to tchilas hektish. Why? Because each of them have a next step of kedusha that follows. Therefore, the halacha should be that what? That the same way you have to pay a chomesh when you redeem tchilas hektish, you should also have to pay a chomesh when you redeem emtza hektish. The Gemara says, Kida Amarava ha'ola. So we'll say, listen to this. So the Gemara says, because after all we see ha'ola. Now the pasuk over here is talking about, the pasuk says, Va'ishal mizbeach tu kabalo sikhbeh, ubir ala kon etzi baboker, va'arach ala ha'ola. You shall offer up the oil. Now what ola is it talking about? This is talking about the tamid shal shachar. The first thing offered up on the mizbeach every single morning was the morning communal offering. So watch this. Rava says, ha'ola, ola rishona. So we'll say, ha'ola teaches us that what? That the first thing that goes on the mizbeach has to be the tamid shal shachar. Now look at Rashi for just a moment. Ha'ola, dichsiv gabi sid. It's almost right across. Ha'ola. We'll say, in life, it's very important to have a kar satov, even for very little things. Sometimes when you're learning a daf Gemara, and Rashi happens to be right across from the place where you are up to in the Gemara, it's a gift. Meaning, even that you have to be makir tov. I don't know who you're makir tov to the printer, to whoever it is, but at least to the Ribono Shel Olam. I'm saying on a serious note that you don't have to search around for a Rashi. It's a little bit of a bonus. Hakar satov for that. Ha'ola, look at Rashi. Ha'ola, dichsiv gabi seda ha'marach. So we'll say the pasuk is talking about over here by arranging the mizbeach in the morning. Ubir aleha koin eitzim baboker va'arach aleha ha'ola. So, hey, Yisera Darish. So, both remember, the pasuk could have just said, Va'arach Allah, Ola. Why does it have to say Ha'ola? What's the hey there? So, hey, Yisera Darish, Shetehei Hi Rishona, Shalo Yehei Hekter, Kodim L'Tamid Shal Shachar. So, both say, what it teaches us is that nothing comes before the Tamid Shal Shachar. So, Ha'ola teaches us that it is the first thing offered up on the Mizbeach, before Ketores, before anything else, Ha'ola. So why is this important for us to both say? Ha'chanami Hatmeya. But remember again, what's the pasuk we're talking about? The pasuk we were quoting was it was in the end of Amud Beis. It was actually Yehuda did in yesterday's daf. Ve'em bebehema Hatmeya. So the Gemara, Rava Darshan, just like Ha'ola means that what? The Ola has to be the first thing offered on the Mizbeach. So too when the pasuk says Hatmeya, it tells you that what? Timeya Rishona tells you that say only what we call Tchilas Hektish. Only the first level of consecration of a Behema Timeya is subject to the laws of Chomesh. Any other subsequent grade or any subsequent level of Hektish, what we call again Emtza Hektish, or there is no Sof Hektish, but Emtza Hektish is not subject to the laws of Chomesh. So Tanya Kavat Reb Shimon Levi say, well, let's finish the sugya. We have a brisa that supports Rabbi Shimon Levi. Remember, Rabbi Shimon Levi was quoted on Amud Beis yesterday. So what's the brisa? Listen, it's actually a fascinating brisa. Parazu tachas para shal hektish. Well, so listen to this. I want to go ahead and I'm redeeming, not swapping, right? But I'm redeeming my para. So I consecrated my cow, and I want to redeem the cow that I consecrated with another cow. So I say, parazu, tachas para shal hektish. This cow that I'm bringing out, we call cow B, shall be consecrated instead of cow A. Or talis zu, tachas tal shal. You understand? It's not a question of semantics. You can't call it a swap. Why? Because if you call it a swap, what is that called? Right, that's called Tmura. Right, so remember again, if you do Tmura, so what's the halacha? Both animals are consecrated. So this is not a swap, this is a deconsecration. I'm deconsecrating A onto B, and that's totally permitted. So remember again, so the halacha is, so I say this cow should be instead of this cow, or this talus should be consecrated instead of this talus. What's the halacha? Talus. So the halacha is, Hekdesho padui. So the halachas are both saying the exchange or the redemption works. The yad hekdish al ha'alyona. But I will say there is one caveat, which is hekdish always, right? The house always wins, right? Hekdish gets the better end of the deal. Now, what do I mean by that? Take a look at Rashi. Rashi is hekdesho padui afa pi shelo sham damim kutsuvim. So we'll say now. Here's the interesting part in this case. The interesting part is okay. You're doing cow for cow or talus for talus. Now, what's the great unknown in this case? Values. So over here, so obviously if the values are the same, Shalom Yisrael. What if the values aren't the same? So Rashi says over here, even though again, I have not evaluated the actual value of the cow that's about to become hekdish. The Ketuvin the Kaimerlon, hekdish shave mana shechilo shave pruta, mechula b'sharles noimine, umiyo yad hekdish alal yomish, shim domim halalu yiserim al demei hekdish, kame hekdish, dem hekdish yes aleihem yashim al karchos. So we'll say, the answer really is, it doesn't really matter. Because let's play this out. It's like, my cow is hekdish, cow A. I decide I want to deconsecrate cow A onto cow B. And I can do that. So I deconsecrate the cow B, now it becomes hektish. So manashach, there are one or two possibilities. Well, there are three possibilities. Possibility one, which is same value. Good, that's easy. Possibility two, right? Cow B is less worth, is worth less than cow A. So okay, no problem. Cow B still becomes hektish, and what? I owe the difference to the Beis HaMikdash. But the interesting case is the following. Let's say cow B is worth more than cow A. So I show up at the Beis HaMikdash with cow B, expecting the Gizbar to give me a shtickle refund, right, for the Dirtzin cow A and cow B, and the Gizbar tells me, thank you, have a nice day. Yad hekdish al ha'alyona. So if the second animal that you are redeeming the first animal with is worth more than animal A, that difference in value ultimately goes to the Beis HaMikdash. Next case. Parazu b'chamesh slam. Parazu b'chamesh slam. So we'll say the next case is the following. The next case is where, same case, I consecrated cow A, I'm now looking to redeem cow A with cow B. So in this case over here, I've attached values. Parazu b'chamesh slaim, tachas para shal hekdish. This cow, which is cow B, which is worth 5 slaim, should redeem the cow that I consecrated before. Or, talis zu b'chamesh slaim, or this talis which is worth 5 slaim, tachas talis shal hekdish, should redeem ultimately again the talis that belongs to hekdish. What's talach rabosai? Hekdish shal padui. Ultimately again, it's a proper redemption. Now look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says, talis zu b'chamesh slaim, hekdish shal padui, afa pi sheino shaveh. See, even though again it's not worth that, v'lo teima hoil b'sham l'damim, ve'ino shaveh kama sha'amar, ein devar of klum, ela hekdish padui v'hu yashin. So both say, the chap over here is, even though in this case, I've gone ahead and articulated an explicit value for this item, the halacha is still the same as before, which is, even if this item is worth more or worth less, well, if it's worth more, Beis HaMikdash keeps the difference. If it's worth less, I have an obligation to make up the remainder to the Beis HaMikdash. But here's the important part to close out our conversation. Al hekdish rishon mosif chomesh, al hekdish sheni ein mosif chomesh. So both said the Brisa supports Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, who said that's what? That lemaisa again, hekdish rishon. Both say, so just for our purposes, what does hekdish rishon mean? Hekdish rishon means first time, meaning I take an animal that is a chulin animal and I makdish it. That's called hekdish rishon. If I then choose to go ahead and what? If I choose to redeem that animal, right? So the halacha is I have to pay a chomesh. But for example, if I redeemed animal A with animal B, and now I seek to go ahead and redeem animal B, what's the halacha, Rabbosai? We do not add on a chomesh. That's Rabbi Shua ben Levi's shita. That chomesh only goes on the first animal of consecration, but not on the transfer of consecration. Says the Mishnah, ha'ona arba kesef. So again, the Mishnah restates that which we learned before. Ona is, remember, four silver pieces out of 24, which is another way of saying ona is a sixth. 1/6 is ona. V'ataino shtei kesef. So now we're getting into some interesting halachas. So the taino shtei kesef. Now what does this mean? Take a look at Rashi. V'ataino shtei kesef. She'ein shvuas hadayonin ala taino bechusa mishtei maos sheet enu shave shtei kesef yesh li biyadecha v'zeyode lo mehem shave pruta v'yichbar hashar o yoda kol yichbar pruta. So the halacha is the following: that a modeh b'miktsas case can only occur. Remember, Modeh Miktsas is partial admission. But before we get to the partial admission, the Mishnah is saying is the claim must be worth 2 silver pieces. In order for a Modeh Miktsas case to unfold, the initial claim must be worth at least 2 silver pieces. Then what plays out over here is, I tell Reuven, you owe me 2 silver pieces. Reuven says, no, I only owe you 1, right? Or I only owe you half. But the initial claim must be at least for 2 silver pieces, as we'll discuss. Next, v'haudah shave pruta. The boss in a modeh b'miktsas case, you have to admit that you owe at least a pruta, right? So again, in order to be chayiv shua, meaning if you admit that you owe less than a pruta, such a statement like that is meaningless. So in order to trigger moda mitzvah shua, you have to admit that you owe at least a pruta. Next, the chamish prutosin. I will say now there are 5 cases in which a pruta is a significant amount. Ha'odah shavar pruta. So we just said before that a moda mitzvah's case, only chayiv shua if you admit at least a pruta. Next, va'isha miskadesh shavar pruta, and a woman becomes mikudesh with an object that is worth at least a pruta. Va'anen shavar pruta min hektish ma'al. And I will say in order to be chayiv mi'ilah, you have to get at least a pruta's worth of hana'ah from the consecrated object. Va'amotzi shavar pruta chayiv lahachris. And I will say, if you find the shavar pruta, you're obligated to go ahead and announce it. We learned that earlier in Elam Metzias. Va'gozel as chavero shavar pruta v'nishpalo. I will say, watch this. And if I stole a shavar pruta from my friend, and what? I swore that I did not steal anything from him. Yolichenu acharav afilu l'madai. We saw that halacha, that you have to find him. We'll say the halacha is, if I stole the shavar pruta and I lied about it, I have to track him down wherever he may be in order to fulfill the mitzvah of Heshav V'Zagazela. So those are the cases in which pruta makes a difference. Let's go right there. Tanina chadazimna. So ask the Gemara, I don't understand. Why are you restating the halachos of Ona? Right? We already learned the halachos of Ona once. Ha'ona arba kesef me'esem va'arba kesef l'sela. We'll say that was 3 Mishnayos ago, right? We learned this on Thursday, that Ona is a 6th, right? We already learned this. Why do you have to restate it over here? To which the Gemara says, Shesus l'mekach hatayna. Shesus l'mekach. So to which the Gemara says, Hatayna shtei kesef, va'odah shave pruta itzrichale. To which the Gemara says, you're right. We don't really need the Ona case, but that was kind of just done as an introduction to the next 2 halachos, which are Tabosai. That in order to have a moda b'mikzah situation, the initial claim had to have been at least 2 silver pieces, and the hodah, the admission, the partial admission, has to be on at least a pruta. So what the Gemara is kind of saying is, once we knew we wanted to speak about that by moda b'mikzah, the initial claim must be for at least 2 silver pieces. Once we're talking about silver, the Mishnah kind of threw in here again the laws of Onah, which ultimately are brought down in relationship to silver. Okay? To which the Gemara says, I don't understand. Hanami tanina. But we learned those halachas as well already. Shvuas hadayonin hatayna shtei kesef, va'odah shave pruta. But we already learned this halacha elsewhere as well. That was said by moda b'mikzas, the initial claim must be for at least 2 silver pieces, and the Gemara there learns that out. The Gemara in Kiddush, we saw this, and we'll see it again. And Shavuos learns this out, and the hodah, the admission, must be for at least a pruta. So again, why does the Mishnah need to quote those 2 cases? We learn that elsewhere as well. At which the Gemara says, Seifa tzrichale, you're right. All of this was all an introduction, I will say, for the end of the Mishnah, because what was the end of the Mishnah? Diktani, chamesh, prutos, hein. So I will say, all this was an introduction for the end of the Mishnah, because the end of the Mishnah said there are 5 interesting cases of prutos. And I will say, let's dig into those cases. Chamesh, prutos, hein. There are 5 different cases of prutos. Melisni nami, ha'ono pruta. So ask the Gemara, I don't understand. Why don't you also include over here that there's a case of Ona'ah b'pruta? In other words, remember, we saw this before. Ona'ah, right? Once you get over a 6th, even if you're a pruta over a 6th, the pashtus, that's already Ona'ah. So why not go ahead and mention that here as well? Amrav Kana, zo someres ein Ona'ah leprutos. Well, this is actually quite interesting. This would appear to say that what? That Lamaisa, according to this opinion in the Mishnah, Ona'ah does not apply to prutos. What does that mean? Look at Rashi. Ein Ona'ah leprutos, bepachos mi'isr shumat be'er shal kesef. They will say apparently the shir for Ona'ah is not measured in prutos. And in fact, the shir for Ona'ah is you have to be overcharged by at least an isser over the 1/6 amount. That it has to be the unit of an isser, not the unit of a pruta. V'chein Tana Levi Masnisei, so to Levi also quoted this, but say in Levi's version of our Mishnah, he had the following. Chamesh prutos hein. There are 5 different cases of pruta. What are the 5 different cases of pruta? So listen to this. Ona'ah overcharging. Okay, sorry. Ha'ona pruta. So we'll say if you overcharge by a pruta by ona, you're chayiv. V'ha'oda pruta. If you're modeh b'miktsas, right? If you're modeh b'miktsas on a pruta, you're chayiv. V'kedusha isha bepruta. Kadeshum with a pruta. The Gemara says v'gezel bepruta. And if you steal a pruta, you're chayiv for that. V'yeshivas hadayonin bepruta. Now we'll say he introduces something interesting over here. Look at Rashi. What does it mean? The yeshivas hadayonin bepruta. Rashi says lamisha yesh lo edin o shechayiv modeh v'dochehu milashalim yesh hadayon v'chvuos. So let's listen to this. If I have a claim against someone, ultimately again, and let's say there are witnesses that support my claim, but the guy is not paying me. So over here, the case is no longer contested. It's recognizable that he owes me the money, but he's squirming out of paying me. So in that case, Beis Din sits down, and Beis Din will get him to pay. Beis Din only sits down for what? For a case of a pruta or more. If the claim is for some reason for less than a pruta, there is no yeshivas hadayon. V'tana didon, my time alo katani yeshivas dayanon. So we'll say, so why doesn't our Mishnah bring down the case of yeshivas dayanon? Right? Remember again, why doesn't our Mishnah quote the case that Beis Din will only convene for a claim of a pruta or more? Tani legezel. To which the Gemara says the Mishnah did. That's kind of the case of gezel. The case of theft means what? Beis Din will only adjudicate a theft case if it's a gezel or more. But one second, that's not true. Because remember, so what the Gemara is essentially suggesting is, the reason why our Tana did not include the case of Yeshivas Dayanin is why? Because Yeshivas Dayanin is under the umbrella of gezel, of theft. But if that's the case, says the Gemara, Milo Tani Gezel, Vekatani Aveda. But one second, the Mishnah says both Gezel and Aveda. And I both say we would assume that's what? Those are to a certain degree certain sister concepts. Right? On one hand, again, you have Gezel, which is theft. On the other hand, Aveda, something lost. So again, I would think that once you go ahead and look at Rashi, Tani Gezel, Mechevan, the Tani Gezel, Pruta, Shmamino Mamona, Hiva Kafina. So you will say, once you hold that you need to have at least a Pruta in order to have a claim of theft, that means what? Pruta is the most basic threshold of what's considered mammon, money. Once it's so, then that same threshold should apply for what? Should apply for lost objects as well. In other words, again, I only have to go ahead and announce something that is significant. When is it significant? Apparently, if it's a pruta. So once you tell me by gezel, I automatically know by aveda. Yet the Mishnah still feels compelled to what? To what? To say both of them. If that's the case, then why not add in yeshivas dayanon as well? To which the Gemara says, no. Hanach it's shrichale. No, the truth is, those cases, you need both of those cases, and I'll tell you why it says the Gemara. Because each of them have a unique aspect. Gezel, hagozel mechavero shavapruta, v'nishpalo. Both say, if I steal from my friend a shavapruta, and I swear that what? I did not steal it. What's the halacha? Yolichenu acharav afilu l'madin. I will say that's the chiddush over here. Can you imagine this? What the Mishnah is teaching me by Gezel Bosa is not just that stealing a pruta or more is significant. What it's saying is, if I stole a pruta or more, right, a pruta, and I lied about it, I swear that I didn't, in order for me to make it right, I need to track down the individual whom I stole from in an effort to return the pruta. That's the chiddush of the Mishnah. Next, Aveda, Shavar Pruta Chayiv Lahachriz, Va'afal Gav Dizal. I will say the chiddush of the Aveda cases, what was it is actually quite fascinating. That what happens in the following situation? I find an Aveda, I find a lost object, and watch this. When I found it, it was worth a pruta. Then what happened? It depreciated. So now it's pachos mishave pruta. What is my chiyuv in such an aveda? So we'll say the halacha is that since it was worth a pruta at the time that I found it, therefore what? There is a chiyuv of hachraza, there is a chiyuv to announce it, even though it subsequently depreciates. For Levi, my time, tani aveda, bepruta. So Levi, why doesn't he include the case of Aveda? Then Aveda has to be at least worth a pruta. Why doesn't he include that in his listing? Tanale Gezel. Well, the truth is, he doesn't have to because he includes the case of Gezel. And once you say that you're only chayiv for a Gezel that's worth a pruta, that tells you that what? That a pruta is the minimum share of significance. Once I know that by Gezel, I could apply that to Aveda as well. Milo katani Gezel, the katani yeshivas hadayon. But one second, that's not true. Levi, you still included both Gezel and yeshivas hadayonin. So why do you need both of those? Yeshivas hadayonin, it's trichale, the afuki midrab katina. I will say, listen to this. Because no, Levi needed to include yeshivas dayanin in order to exclude the position of Rav Katina. What did Rav Katina say? Rav Katina will say, this is wild. Beis din niskakin afilum the pachos mishaver pruta. We'll say, why don't you do Rav Katina? Rav Katina holds, well, so first of all, can you imagine the sheer volume of cases then? Right? I mean, Rav Katina holds that Beis Din adjudicates even in cases of Pachos Mishaveh Pruta. We'll say, by the way, that, that it's interesting. You want to say, like, what's the svara of that? What's the svara that you should shav pruta? So the Gemara brings out, Rashi HaKadosh quotes it, that when the Torah says Vatimalei haaretz chamas by Dor HaMabul, so Rashi says one of the things that Dor HaMabul did, that they did, generation of the flood, is they were Rishayim, but they were also Chachamim. So what did they do? They went ahead and they would always steal Pachos Mishaveh Pruta. Pachos Mishaveh Pruta. That's what they would do. So why? Because again, if I steal Pachos Mishaveh Pruta, then what? Then what? But imagine just the following: if you steal Pachos Mishaveh Pruta every single day, right, or a couple of times a day, you could amass for yourself. And I'm not encouraging it, but you could, you could amass for yourself a pretty nice fortune. So I say, meaning what's the pshat? The pshat. So why would Rav Katina say that Beis Din has to adjudicate even Pachos Mishaveh Pruta? Because we'll say, what's the musar? The musar is that sometimes when we do negative things in life, so it doesn't come yesh me'ayin. It doesn't come somewhere. It doesn't come from nothing. The negative things we do in life are often a composite of smaller little missteps that occurred along the way. And when I don't correct the smaller missteps along the way, those smaller missteps ultimately combine into huge mistakes. That's what happens in life. I could commit a whole bunch of things that are Pachos Mishaveh Pruta on their own. Maybe they're halachically or hashkafically or spiritually negligible. But when you put them together, when you string them together, they lead to sometimes spiritually catastrophic results. Rav Katina says, therefore again, in a society, Beis Din is going to adjudicate even Pachos Mishaveh Pruta. Why? Because if you don't nip Pachos Mishaveh Pruta in the bud, it becomes Yoser Mishaveh Pruta very quickly. And I will say, it's an incredible musar for life as well. We all live with inconsistencies. And sometimes we don't feel a need to address our inconsistencies because we say, it's Pachos Mishaveh Pruta. Right? Famous, I'm not going to Gehenna for this. Right? Maybe for that. Right? I'm going for something else. Right? But this is not going to be what condemns me in the afterlife. Right? It's Pachos Mishaveh Pruta. Well, in a vacuum, that might be right. But you know what? When you live a lifetime of Pachos Mishaveh Pruta, it doesn't end well. Because those Pachos Mishaveh, you know the halacha, Pachos Mishaveh Pruta is mitzarif. That's the halacha. Right? If you take a Pachos Mehir and a Pachos Shoneh and a Pachos Mehir, it's mitzarif to a Shaveh Pruta. It's important for us to address even the small things in life before they become something bigger. Says the Gemara, the Levi my taima lo katani hektish b'chulin. So why doesn't Levi include the case of hektish? Meaning, why doesn't Levi include the case of ultimately again that if you get hana'ah, if you get hana'ah from hektish up to a pruta's value, that it's milah? Because Levi b'chulin kamayri, b'kachim lo kamayri. Because in Levi's list, he's only dealing with hektish, not with chulin. Sorry, right? He's only dealing with chulin, not with hektish. Elatana didan the kamayri b'kachim nisni ma'aser b'pruta. So 1 second, our Tana, who is dealing with Kachim, why doesn't he also go ahead and include the case, ultimately again, of Meiser Bepruta? To say that, what does that mean? That goes back to our previous Gemara, which is that you can't be Poda, you can't redeem Meiser that is less than a Shavar Pruta. Why doesn't he include that in the Mishnah as well? To which the Gemara says, because we'll say ultimately the Tana of our Mishnah holds that when we talk about that you can't redeem Meiser for less than a 50, remember we had the Machlokes on Wednesday or Thursday about when we say that the Meiser has to be Shavar Pruta, is that the Meiser itself, or is that the Chomesh of the Meiser has to be Shavar Pruta? So our Tana holds that it has to be the Chomesh, therefore he doesn't include it in the Mishnah. But listening Chomesh Meiser Bepruta, so I don't understand. So why don't you just say that in the Mishnah? Why don't you just say that you can only redeem Meiser Sheni if what? If the Chomesh is worth a Pruta, to which the Gemara answers, Bakarna Kamari Bechomesh Lo Kamari. Because no. The Mishnah is only dealing with Keren situations, principal issues, not secondary principles. So not secondary amounts. Says the Gemara, right? Gufa. Amarav Katina, Beis Din Niskak and Afila Pachos Shar Pruta. So let's go back to what we said before. Beis Din, according to Rav Katina, even deals with pachos mishaver pruta cases. I b'masiv Rava raises the kasha. Ve'is asher chata min ha'hegdish yishalim. Both say the pasuk says ve'is asher chata min ha'kodesh yishalim. That which you sinned from the kodesh, you should go ahead and pay. So in other words, both say in this context, what this means is when you benefit from kodesh, you should go ahead and pay. So both say amud beis l'rabos pachos mishaver pruta lihishavon. This teaches us what? That halacha l'maisa, even if you went ahead and you benefited less than a shavar pruta, you're obligated to pay that back. But when is that so? L'kodesh in aval hedyot lo. But we'll say again, the Torah goes out of its way to say yes, pachot mishavar pruta is significant when it comes to hektish, but not when it comes to hedyot. Now, both say that seems to be a kasha on who? That's a kasha ultimately again on Rav Katina, right? Because Rav Katina was ultimately the one who said that based in the tzakin afilu lepachos yishavar pruta, even in what? It seems to be even in a case of chulin. But yet again, it seems to be clear that pachos yishavar pruta is really only legally enforceable, or only have an obligation to pay back only in hektish. To which the Gemara says, "Ela itmar hachi itmar." This is what you should say. Amar Rav Katina. Oh, we'll say now everything comes together. Because remember our kasha that we had is Rav Katina really saying that Beis Din sits, that Beis Din it goes to session even in a case of pachos mishaver pruta. That's going to be a huge volume on Beis Din. I will say often those cases are not even quantifiable. So what's the pshat? To which the Gemara says, here's what you have to say. Ela itmar hachi itmar. Amar Rav Katina. Here we go. We'll say im huskiku Beis Din l'shaver pruta. Gomrim afilu lepachos mishaver pruta. Oh, we'll say what it means is the following. This is kind of like, what it reminds us of? Right. It reminds us of Gilgul Shvua. We'll say, remember what Gilgul Shvua is? Sometimes there are certain things for which you cannot generate an obligation to take a Shvua. But what? Once you are already taking a shvuah, we could cause that shvuah to devolve upon other things as well, which normally themselves could not generate an obligation for shvuah. So what the Gemara is suggesting is, our Kaftina says is the following. The halacha is, Beis Din only can be called to session for a claim that is a pruta or more. But once the litigants are in Beis Din for a claim that is a pruta or more, then what? Then Beis Din could hear the other small claims item as well. In other words, once you're already in Beis Din, once you're already in the document, once you're already in the system, then Beis Din will even hear your pachos mishavar pruta cases as well. So im huskiku Beis Din l'shavar pruta, kol mafila pachos mishavar pruta, tchilas hadin ba'inan pruta. So really what it means is to get to court. In other words, to call the court to session, you need a claim that's what? That you need a claim that is worth at least a pruta, but Gemaradin lo ba'inar pruta. But I will say, once you're in Beis Din already, so again, Beis Din will even hear your pachos mishava pruta case. That's what Rashi. Gomer nafilu b'pachos em chaz Rashini v'tala pachos shara pruta kodem sham du Beis Din misham niskakil. So we'll say, once the litigants are there, if one of the parties says, "Wait, Dayanim, before you leave, I have another claim. It's pachos mishava pruta." Once Beis Din is already in session, we'll hear the pachos mishavar pruta claim again. Says the Mishnah. We'll say, we're almost there. Says the Mishnah. Chamisha chum shinheim. The both said there are 5 cases of chomesh. What are the 5 cases of chomesh? So says the Mishnah, ha'ochal truma. Here are the 5 cases. Ha'ochal truma. The both say if somebody, this is a non-Kohen, who eats truma, the halacha is, not only does he have to pay back the principal, but he has to pay back an additional 5th. Next, trumas meiser. Both remember again, the Levi gets meiser. And when the Levi gets meiser, he is obligated to separate out truma from that meiser to give to the Kohen. So if a Yisrael goes ahead and accidentally eats trumas meiser, again, he has to pay back principal plus what? Plus the 1/5. Next, utrumas meiser shel dmai. Both say, now this is interesting. Remember, we learned about dmai in a number of different masechtos. So what's dmai? So remember again, I get produce from an Amaretz, from someone who's unlearned. So there was a takana that essentially said when you get produce from an Amaretz, you cannot assume that it's tithed. So essentially, you have to fully retithe it. We will see there's one exception to that, which was what? What we call Truma Gidola. The assumption was even Amei Haaretz separated out Truma ultimately again for the Kohen. It's the rest of the ties that we're a little bit more concerned about. So let's say one goes ahead and eats Trumas Meiser of Demai. Same thing. You'd have to pay back the principal plus the 5th. V'achala. I will say if I accidentally ate the challah, which is the portion of the Kohen, or bikurim, I accidentally ate bikurim, first fruits, the halacha is Mosif Chomesh. Most in all of these cases, I have to pay back not just principal, but I have to pay back the fifth as well. Va'apode not to Ravai. So we'll say, what's not to Ravai? Again, beautiful case. Remember again, person plants a vineyard for first 3 years. What's the halacha? Well, you can't eat it. Arla, right? By the way, it's not just vineyard, right? But vineyard has this extra halacha of not to Ravai, which is in the fourth year. In the fourth year, it's yours. You can eat it, but what? You have to eat it in your shleim. It's almost like Meiser Sheni. Pretty much like Meiser Sheni. So what happens? Hapode not to Ravai. If somebody redeems their not to Ravai produce, Meiser Sheni shalo, or you redeem your own Meiser Sheni. We'll say, why did it say shalo? Why did it say shalo? Because remember again, we learned that there's a workaround in the system. If you want to avoid the fifth, what can you do? Have someone else redeem your Meiser Sheni for you. That's why it says Meiser Sheni shalo. So we'll say in these cases of redemption, right? Most of chomesh, you have to add on an additional fifth. Va'apode as hakdesho. Similarly, if you redeem your consecrated items, Mosif Chomesh, you have to add on an additional fifth. Hanene Shavar Pruta Min HaHekdish, Mosif Chomesh. Both sides, if you get a Pruta's benefit of Hekdish, which both sides is another name for, another Mi'ilah, you commit Mi'ilah. Not only do you have to repay back principal, but you also have to go ahead and pay back the fifth. And if one goes ahead and steals from his friend a pruta's amount, the nishbalo, and he swore falsely, mosif chomesh. He goes in and adds on a fifth. We'll discuss that case as well. Says the Gemara, Amarava, Kashi Rabbi Lazar Shumas Meiser Shel Demai. So let's listen to this. So Rabbi said, whenever Rabbi Lazar would learn this Mishnah, he was always especially bothered by this case of Trumas Meiser of Demai. So we'll say, remember again, so what's the case of the Mishnah? So essentially, I go ahead, I have Demai produce, I go ahead and I give it over to the Levi. The Levi went ahead and separated from it Trumas Meiser. What happens? I go ahead and I eat it. I, the Yisrael, eat it. So what's the halacha? I have to go ahead and, or the Levi eats it, doesn't just have to do me. Go ahead and I pay back the principal and the fifth. Now, both I understand, Demai is Dirabanan. Right? Meaning, midda oraisa, we assume that people go ahead and tithe their produce. Midda rabbanan, there's an extra gzera on amei haaretz. So the Gemara says the fine. So I will say, so now what we're saying is, you have to pay an additional fifth on something that is essentially biblically okay, but rabbinically problematic. So asks Rebbe Lazar, V'chi asu chachamim chizuk l'divreim keshal Torah. Did the rabbis try to make their halachas as strong as the Raisas? In other words, both say this idea. So essentially, it's another way of saying like you're piling on a lot of stuff over here. Meaning, your midda Raisa, this produce is assumed to be tithe. So I understand if you take biblically untithed produce and you have to add on a fifth. But here, both say you're taking. If I eat trumas meiser of demai, so are the rabbanan so machmir and their halachas that I'm going to have to pay back not just principal, but a fifth on something that is only rabbinically problematic? Is that the level to which they go? To which the Gemara says, first of all, look at Rashi. The obligation to separate is on rabbanan. Do the rabbis go so far? And the answer is yes. Amr Nachman, Amr Shmuel, Haman Rabbi Meir. Yes, this Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Meir. Because what does Rabbi Meir say? The Amr Asu Chacham Chizuk L'Direim Kishal Torah. Yes, when the Chachamim legislate, what Rabbi say? Why they legislated their laws like Doraisas. Rabbi say for very good reasons. Why? Because it is human nature to push the envelope. And it is human nature to always try to walk the line between that which is right and that which is wrong. And the Chachamim therefore created a very strong rabbinic infrastructure so as to ensure that people do not go ahead and deviate. Now both sides, they understand, by the way, they did that, and you know what? Here's the amazing part. What's the amazing part? Still doesn't work. Right? Meaning, again, people still push the line, right? And people still go ahead and violate. So again, we see what happens. We see what happens now, even with a strong rabbinic infrastructure. So imagine what would happen without those halachas. So we'll say, therefore, the Mishnah says, this is the opinion of Rabbi Meir. We'll say, listen to this, the Sanya. Because what Rabbi Meir say, and we'll say what this case will end. This is going to take us to the end of the daf. Hamevi, get Medinas Hayam. So listen to this. If I go ahead and I bring a get from overseas, this is taking us back to our Gittin days. Hamevi get Medinas Hayam. Nasnula. So we'll say again, quick refresher course, beginning of Mesechus Gittin. So what happens? The Mishnah, first Mishnah in Gittin brings down the idea that if you bring a get from Chutz La'aretz, you have to Eretz Yisrael, or really in Chutz La'aretz as well, you have to say B'fanei Nechtav or B'fanei Nechtam, which very quickly just means what? That you are attesting to the fact that the get was written L'shma, that the get was written again for the sake of this man and for the sake of this woman. So watch this. Let's say a man brings a get from overseas. So, right, a shaliach delivers a get from Baltimore to Eretz Yisrael, and what happens? But he gives it to her. He never made this statement. Now, again, let's be clear. The reason why Chazal or the rabbis instituted this was because there was a concern that in Chutz La'aretz they were ein bikiyim l'shma. Right? They were not proficient in the halachos that the get had to be written for the sake of this man, the sake of this woman. Therefore, when the shaliach came, we needed him to attest to the lishmakite of this get. We'll say, midda araisa, do you need b'fai nechtam? No. Right? Now that's for a whole different, either that's because Eidi Chasima Karsi, Eidi Mesir Karsi, not getting back into it now, but suffice to say, for our purpose today, you don't need it. The rabbis came along, the Rabbana came along and said, yes, you do need it. So watch this. Shaliach comes from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael, he delivers the get, and he just never said, Nechtam. So what happens? So the woman gets her get, she's happy. Why? Now she goes and gets remarried and she has children. What does Rabbi Meir say? Yotzi v'avlad mamzer, Div Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says, second marriage is void, and any children shared from the second marriage are mamzerim. Why? Because according to Rabbi Meir, that first get is not good. Or that get is not good. Therefore, she remarried illegally, and therefore any children, it's prior to adultery, and any children are mamzerim. The Chum say, come on, no. Ein havlad mamzer. Chachamim will say, we'll say, you'll see, by the way, the Chachamim agree in certain principles with Rabbi Meir, but disagree in the severity of his application. So the Chachamim will say, no, we're not going to make the children a mamzer, but what we will do is the following: Ketzad Yaseh. But even the Chachamim will agree we do need to remedy this situation. So what should we do? Ketzad Yaseh, yitlena mimena, v'yachzer v'yitnena la b'fnei shnayim, v'yomar la b'fanei nechtav u'b'fanei nechtam. The Chachamim will say, we do need a second giving of the get. So what we will need to do is we will need to get the get back from her and to have the shaliach go ahead and give it back to her in front of witnesses, and for the shaliach to say, B'fanei nechta, b'fanei nechtam. So again, the Chachamim will agree that we do need to kind of re-give the get, but we will not go ahead and therefore say that the second marriage was adultery and the children are mamzerim. That far we will not go with this. Rabbi Meir. So both say, Chacham Shita makes a lot of sense. I understand. Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir, really? Really? Meaning, are you going to go that far? Because the Shaliach did not say B'fanei nechtam, but B'fanei nechtam. Therefore, you're going to say that what? That ultimately, again, A, the get is not good. B, the second marriage is illegal. And therefore, C, the children are mamzerim. To which the Gemara says, yes. In Rabbi Meir, L'tamei, Davram Hamnunim Mishmei Du'ula, Omer Hayi Rabbi Meir, Kala Mishana Mimadbea Shatabu Chacham and Begin Yotzi Vahavlad Mamzer. Yes, because Rabbi Meir is of the opinion that any time you deviate from the rabbinic structure of Gittin, Rabbi Meir says you cannot play with the system. If you change from what the Chacham established, ultimately, again, the get is void, second marriage is illegal, and ultimately the children are mamzerim. I will say, now this may sound to you like a very severe shita, and it is a very severe shita, and we don't hold it Rabbi Meir in this case, well, the Chacham, but understand, Rabbi Meir's Surah, I will say, is, especially when it comes to Gittin, this is the very preservation of proper yichus is dependent on two things. It's dependent on marriage, and it's dependent on Gittin. And therefore there is an absolute need to keep a very tight hold over these two things, because again, allowing the system to fall into a state of disrepair can chas v'shalom really allow for the total erosion of familial lines, of familial yichus. Therefore Rabbi Meir says that any time you go ahead and you change from the matbeh shel, which means from the coin that the Chachamim coined, the halacha is yotzi v'avlad mamzer, the get is void, second marriage is illegal, children are mamzer. I will say, so again, why are we bringing all of this down? Because the Gemara is suggesting over here that what? That our Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Meir. How so? Because that's why that even if you eat Trumas Meiser of Demai, which is rabbinic, I will say, what's going to be the halacha? The halacha is not only do you have to pay back the principal, but you also have to go ahead and pay back the additional fifth. All right, we'll say we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up at the massive tomorrow. Shkoyach.